This is where, before coming to Florida, this is where I spent my time, and I'll give you a little bit more specifics on that. I did my undergraduate training at Columbia University, first founded in 1754 as King's College, down near what is now Wall Street, and then moved uptown here with this very neoclassical architecture by a firm of McKim, Mead and White. And I spent my college years, which again in Europe you don't have per se, because we divide college and then graduate school. And I knew I wanted to be a surgeon from the time I was a young child, and I think that had to do with observing my sister, 4 years younger, who at one point was ill, taken in the emergency room. Thankfully, she did better quickly, but I was rather intrigued. And then watching my paternal grandma, who unfortunately had a myocardial infarction and passed away, and we were a relatively small quarter. And I think those two things were really events that grabbed me. Nobody in my family was in the medical profession at all. My dad is an attorney. He subsequently became a judge, and in fact, the supervising judge of the Supreme Court of Long Island, which is a densely populated area, just again, outside of New York City, where I grew up. My grandfather was an attorney, my sister's an attorney. So I didn't have a role model, but I knew it's what I wanted to be. So little known fact, when I went to Columbia, although I was pre-med, I majored in English. I thought, doctors know science, but doctors need to know how to write if one wants to be academic. And so that's what I decided to do, is be an English major. And you heard that I've published a couple of papers here and there. So maybe that helped. When I finished Columbia, with the exception of a brief foray at University College London, which I arranged myself, most of my time was at Columbia. And then I went across town to Cornell University, to what is now the Weill College of Medicine, and did my undergraduate medical education at Cornell. My role model there was G. Tom Shires, the trauma surgeon from the Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas, who had just come with a big group of his disciples to Cornell. And I saw what academic surgery was really all about. And finished at Cornell, went back across town to Roosevelt Hospital, which has subsequently changed names and shape many times. When I trained there, it was looking something like this, the Sims Operating Theater. This operating theater started in 1891, which was slightly before I trained there, but still exists. And most of the facility looked something like this when I trained there. After I left, it was completely morphed and changed into this much more modern facility, which became merged with St. Luke's Hospital. And then after that, it became something else. I don't even remember the name that temporarily was. And then it ultimately became Mount Sinai West. It's still there on 59th Street, 10th Avenue, 9th Avenue, for those of you who know New York City. And the Sims Amphitheater is still a historic landmark. And there I had two mentors who really helped me out. And I'll get to them in just a second. One of my mentors was a fellow named Rick Brabe, who retired many years ago. And Rick Brabe had trained with Stanley Goldberg at the University of Minnesota here in Minneapolis. And Rick was invited every year to speak at Stan Goldberg's autumn course in September, October. And he'd asked me if I'd help him prepare some lectures. And in exchange, I got to go out to the University of Minnesota as a young resident, a second year, third year resident, having prepared Rick's talks. And I got to meet the faculty and decided that's where I wanted to go to do colorectal, which ultimately I did. I spent 1 year, little detour between New York and Florida and Minnesota. The other major mentor retired much later, this fellow, Tom Daly, who was a real influence on me. He's shown here. And he is, between he and Rick Brabe, they got me settled in with Stanley Goldberg, which is where I did my colorectal, as I say. And that really gave me a tremendous opportunity to see what it was like to mentor, because both of these fellows are incredible mentors. And through Stan Goldberg in 1987, I think, I met Bill Heald. Actually, it may have even been sooner. It was sooner. It was 84. It was 84. I met Bill Heald. and became quite good friends over the years with Bill, who I consider to be one of my tremendous mentors. When he heard that I was an Anglophile, immediately said, "When are you next coming to the UK?" And I said, "Well, within the next few months." And we became friends, and I spent many times at his home with him, and going to the operating room in Basingstoke District Hospital at the time, and came within a hair of training there. It was a real toss-up. When I finished training with Tom Daly, Bill wanted me to come as his SR, senior registrar, and Stan said, no, you should train in colorectal in the US first so you can become board certified, hopefully, and then you can go to the UK if you like. Don't do it the other way around. So I followed the advice. I went to Stan, and I never did do that SR year with Bill Heald, but probably had enough cumulative time at Basingstoke District Hospital, which has of course changed names as well. I probably had enough time to have actually done an SR year with the amount of time spent there with him, learning from him. But Stan was my main official mentor at the University of Minnesota. Stan also introduced me to David Jagelman. So this is a picture of David Jagelman and Stan Goldberg during the first time we put on a course here in Florida, which became internationally renowned and attended by, at its peak, which would have been in the late 90s, we would get 700, 800, 900 registrants world, many from Europe. It was always what in the US is President's Birthday Weekend. It's a bank holiday in UK, half term in many places, summer in Latin America and Australia in mid-February. So this was our first course, 1990. I sort of took a page from Stan's book, and he had that fall course I mentioned in Minnesota. And when David recruited me in 1987, I said, why don't we start a course here? So we opened for business February 29th, 1988. We launched our first course, which we held annually until the pandemic. And this was at our very first course in February 1990. So, a mere 32 years ago. When I came down, I was at a place that, like Roosevelt, no longer exists, Cleveland Clinic, Florida. We came down here to a medical environment in Southeast Florida, a community of, at that time, probably about 5 million people, now 7 million, with no medical schools, no residency programs, and no fellowships. So I had the opportunity to really build, not only locally, but nationally and internationally in this region. So we met a lot of opposition. We came down to a place that had no academic medicine at all, zero, except the University of Miami down in Miami, and about a 5-hour drive by the University of South Florida. And really, there was nothing in the area. And there was a lot of resentment because the private practice people didn't like the fact that we were here. So a lot of obstacles. We started out with a very antiquated hospital, beautiful location. Those of you who visited with us, beautiful location on the beach in Fort Lauderdale. And about 10 miles, 16 kilometers away was the outpatient clinic building, which was a half an hour drive backwards and forwards trying to get there, which was rather inconvenient. But nonetheless, we started and we grew. And again, here's that same time period when we started our first course in 1990. And unfortunately, David passed away in August 8th, 1993. He's 53 years old, but he was diagnosed with a malignancy in March of 1993. And so I was kind of orphaned at that point without a local mentor, and really, just had to sort it out on my own, which I suspect is why I'm so keen to mentor people from around the world, because I knew what it was like not to have a mentor, to have one transiently, and then not to have one. We started our training program, as I mentioned. We were the first residency or fellowship program in an area of 5 million people. In 1990, we started that program, really 89. John Cheap was our very first trainee. Floriano Marchetti, who's now on faculty at University of Miami, is our first research fellow. David and myself, with a somewhat different colored hair than I have now. We just launched the program saying, well, this is why we're here. And this was the first training program in any specialty in this area of 5 million people. We started with a very small department. We had one secretary and one nurse clinician who is like kind of a physician's assistant, permanent helper. That was it. That was our department. And not only did we work together. I got to learn from the hands of the master, but we played together. This is a picture from the tripartite meeting, which I think was in 1990, if memory serves. It could have been 89, in Birmingham in the UK. At that point, the meeting was not yet going to Australasia. It was every 5 years in either North America or the UK. And this was I believe, the 1989 Birmingham meeting. So, one of the wonderful things about being a mentor, or mentee in this case, is also not only getting the educational value, but socially. I mean, just getting to know somebody, because if you know somebody well, you're going to be able to work with them well. And we expanded the department, and this is 1997, so 4 years after David had passed away. And we kept Rick Weiss, who was one of our residents from 93 to 94. So Rick had the distinction of being the first colorectal, well, not just first colorectal, he was the first physician or surgeon in any specialty who trained in South Florida and stayed in South Florida, other than, of course, the University of Miami. Nobody else had done it in Broward County, Palm Beach County, Collier County, Lee County. So Rick is still in our faculty. David and I recruited Juan Nagaris in about 1991 or 2 to join us, who was also at the University of Minnesota, and Fabio Potenti, who has trained with us, was on staff and then retired. And you may recognize many of the faces here: Omar Alabaz from Turkey, Agustina Ratulam from Italy. I'm not going to go through all of them. Christian Cock Hernandez from Colombia, Robert Gilliland from Ireland, Konstantinos Mavrotonis from Greece, Elio Moreira from Goiânia, Brazil. Armando Nassim is actually back with us. Christina Sardinia teaches in Long Island Jewish Hospital. Jean-Francois Latulippe in Montreal. So we trained leaders, and we grew from that first group of people, and we kept growing as the years went by. We kept getting more and more people, and I'm very proud of the fact that we've trained, to my knowledge, more leaders in surgery, in other words, department heads, division heads, section heads, and others, to my knowledge, than just about any other program. Certainly one of the most frequent. John Efron is now one of the leading luminaries at Johns Hopkins, as an example. I mean, many, Kuram Beg from the UK, many of you, I'm sure, know Rongwell Zhao from Shanghai, and so on and so forth. People who've gone on and made tremendous careers, Christian Hamill from Switzerland. And as I say, not only was it working together, playing together, and I mentioned over the years, part of, I think, wonderful mentorship was also wonderful friendship. And with Bill Heald, this was at the Buxton Brown dinner at the Royal College of Surgeons some years back, one of our years on our course in our boat, with my much better half, Mariana Berho, at Ficari in Latin America. And here's Bill, this son Wesley was probably about 5 in that photo. He's now almost 30, and much younger Bill Heald horsing around with Wesley at Bill's home. So, again, mentorship is inspiring people through educational contacts, and if possible, through personal contacts too, and having a wonderful time. Again, learning from the hands of the master, and operating together. So it's when possible, work together, play together. Not always possible in this day and age, particularly with COVID and with remote mentoring that I have the wonderful opportunity to do through social media, but it's not always possible. We started in that little antiquated facility that was a 153-bed hospital 10 miles away from our outpatients building. We opened a unified campus July 2nd, 2001. Gorgeous new campus, which has continued to grow and continued to expand. We started with 26 doctors. I was one of that first group. Now, again, Mariana Berho, my partner, she is our chief of staff. She hired 57 doctors this year alone. We have a tremendous, ever-growing group of individuals at our campus in Weston, and our region has grown under the leadership of Connor Delaney, who I'm sure everybody here at the meeting today knows. We have clinics all around the South Florida region. We have hospital and outpatient facilities in Indian River, Martin. So this is up the coast. Orlando is sort of up here somewhere. Miami is down here. Tampa's over here. So we now have grown from 155 beds that we started with to over 1,000 beds, and our staff size with helpers and whatnot is well over 10,000 people. Now, how do I pay that back? So I got this fantastic mentorship and stimulation to be the surgeon that I always wanted to be from Rick Brabe, Tom Daly, Stan Goldberg, Bill Heald, and of course, David Jagelman. So how did I pay that back? By trying to be the best leader that I could in programs which, as you heard from Dr. De Leon, that I've had a chance to lead, the societies that I've led as president or as chair or as vice chair, in the case of the ACS Board of Regents, to try and pay it back as best I can. And part of that has been training people from all over the world. And I'm sure there's lots of arrows missing here, but many alumni all over the world. I hazard a guess that when COVID finally ends and I go back to operating, it's going to be like it was, or operating overseas, as it was in the past, that I could go pretty much anywhere and rely upon my own alumni to assist me in surgery and host me in that location. And that's a wonderful thing. If everyone on this meeting, you're fortunate enough to get in a leadership position, it's not your obligation, it's your pleasure, it's your privilege, it's your honor to train the next generation of people and to keep expanding the pool of people who are available, to keep getting more and more people out there as leaders throughout the world. In this day and age, I've alluded to it before, a lot of mentorship can be done remotely. It's no longer necessary that everybody come together in the same time and same place. In fact, it's not even possible. Today in the Netherlands, it's locked down again. UK is debating what to do. France, Germany, New York. It's not possible. But thankfully, through the various social media platforms, as many of you participate in Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and in the Ask channel, we can communicate, we can mentor. And I've had the tremendous opportunity to be able to work with people, all of whom I really met through social media. I mean, and now I work with and we're friends. And Antonio Quesido Marula in Ontario, Pete Cabrera in Colombia, Delia Cortez Biral from Madrid and Saudi, Manish Chand from the UK, Venki Munakrishnan from Chennai, India, Sameh Hane, who's actually now a researcher in my department here at this time, and Julio Majal from Madrid. All people who I met through social media. So I will commend to you, social media is a tremendously powerful platform to connect with the world and to be able to make the world a much smaller place and to train together. I think there's a Petronas Towers in the back. I could be talking now to somebody online from Kuala Lumpur, from Malaysia. The world connects through social media. And those of us who are now fortunate enough to be leaders have an opportunity, as I've done, to connect with many more people than just those who show up at our doorstep and to mentor them. So, my career path was through the very traditional pass-off from 2 colorectal surgeons at Roosevelt Hospital to Stanley Goldberg and his group of 10 or so individuals at the time at the University of Minnesota, to David Jagelman. I had the opportunity to build a program with David, to continue to be mentored throughout my career by Bill Heald, and then to translate that traditional hands-on pass-off to translate it into getting mentorship opportunities with more and more people throughout the world through social media. And of course, through people coming and visiting with me. It's still an immense pleasure when people come in person and work with me, as Dr. Sameh Hane Amelia from Mansoura, England, Mansoura, Egypt, is now doing. And I know many other people are, waiting in line for us to open again, as we used to in the past, to welcome people all of the time. So, my inspiration was a couple of people, and I'm certainly doing my best to try and inspire folks from around the world, whether in person when possible or remotely when not possible, to those who've not worked with mentors, reach out. Anybody in my vintage who is worth his or her salt will be very happy to try and collaborate, as we do in this group, as we do in many other groups. You know, global collaboration is what it's all about, and I'm happy to do it, and I'm sure so are others in my position. So I'm available for questions. I've got as much time as you need to answer any questions. So thanks again for the privilege.
Thank you very much, Professor Wexner. This was an outstanding lecture. I was hoping that something that you mentioned during this lecture was the relevance of a mentor. I think this is the most important thing in medicine, and as getting training as a good surgeon, having a mentor and having support from many others or many experienced surgeons. So I really want to ask you to get a comment regarding that. As a mentor, what was the most inspirational comment to give for many of these young surgeons?
Yeah, mentorship is key. It's how we've perpetuated our specialty, and I'm sure every type of vocation and profession in the world since since the Greeks and the word and mentor started in ancient Greece. And like I say, it used to be that it had to be in person. Before all of the technology and social media platforms we have now. I mean, I was fortunate enough to have met Stanley Goldberg, David Jago, and Bill Heald, and to become friendly with all of them. But that's, that was what was necessary. You had to meet people and spend time with them. That's not necessarily true anymore, whether that's, communicating with people remotely, even email and text message, WhatsApp, participating in meetings like this globally. The fact that I'm seeing messages here from Bangladesh, from many places around the world, Turkey, not everybody has the opportunity to travel and to work and spend a period of time learning. So it's my pleasure as a mentor to do whatever I can. If people can come, fantastic. But if they can't, I do my best to collaborate, whether that's working on systematic reviews and meta-analyses, whether that's finding ways to speak together at panels, whatever that is. That's what we need to do as mentors. And reach out. If you're a mentee, reach out to whoever you like and say, listen, I'd like to work with you in this way. So yeah, I would say that's important. Do you want me to tackle the questions in the chat, or do you want to ask them?
Yes, please go ahead.
So first, Dr. Mauer asked, what are the most important qualities in a surgical leader? And I think leading by example tops that list. If you're passionate, and I always tell my kids this, and told them when they were growing up, pick something that's your passion and everything else will follow. If you pick something because you think it looks glamorous or because you think you're going to make a lot of money, you may not do well at it because you don't have that passion. Pick what's passionate and the rest will follow. So if you're a leader, hopefully you got there because you have a passion for surgery and you have a passion for quality outcomes for patients and a passion for teaching other people how to be surgeons. So I think leading by example, and that means, being able to operate, being able to write, being able to speak, being able to lead, being, humble and humility, which can be hard as you ascend the leadership ladder, but being able to listen to other people. This is key, listen. When you talk, you hear what you already know. When you listen, you may learn something. And when you're trying to lead people, the best way to be empathetic to their needs is to listen to them. The other part of a leader is realizing that not everyone has the same goals you do. I mean, not everybody may want to work the hours you do or the types of operations you do or publish or speak. You need to listen to your mentees. What is it they want? Because, it's more like coaching at that point than mentorship. So at that point, you say, okay, this person isn't exactly like me. That's fine. I've listened to them. I empathize with what they want, and I need to help them get there. So their goals might be different. Their goals might be, I want to go into private practice. I don't want anything to do with academics. I just want to find the best job I can. Well, then that's our job as leaders, is to help them find that job. So listening to people to be able to understand what they want and then helping them achieve those goals. That's another very important characteristic of a leader. And being accessible. It may not be physically accessible, particularly when travel's there, but at least this day and age, remotely accessible. It's very difficult when you're a leader and the people you're leading can't get in touch with you. So you have to be accessible to people in this day and age as well. So I think those are the major points in my view. What else do we have here? Thank you. Struggles, adversity. Recall incidents in your life that made me stronger and move on. Well, that's an interesting one. I mean, we all experience disappointments, and I can tell you a couple. Number one, I started trying to publish peer-reviewed scientific publications when I was a teenager, working in somebody's laboratory in a hospital on alpha-fetoprotein, and nothing ever came of it. And I then went into another lab when I was in undergraduate college at Columbia. I was working at Albert Einstein College of Medicine and working on strontium substituting for calcium and Purkinje fibers. None of this stuff ever got published. And I spent years working in different labs. And it wasn't until medical school with Tom Shires that I started getting some things published on fibronectin. So it was many years before the first thing actually stuck. And I didn't let that dissuade me. I just thought, how can I do things differently? Not necessarily getting a position you want, that you want to do something particular, but a search committee or people making the decision may say no, and of course it's happened. And you have to say, okay, move on. It's called resilience, and you have to be able to accept that I wouldn't say nobody, but it would be sort of unusual to always get everything you want. And if you take a defeatist attitude, people around you are going to sense that. That's not going to be terribly helpful to be recognized as a leader if you're kind of dejected or say, whatever it is, you do it. You don't have. And I would say for me, probably the most profound was all those years of not publishing anything till finally got to publish. Great, wonderful. Don't give up. If at first, it's the old adage, if at first you don't succeed, try again. So I think those are the struggles in younger life, certainly. Let's see what else. Those are only two questions I see so far, but I'm certainly game for any more. A reverse question: how to choose a mentor? Hang on a second. Let's see what this one is. Ask reverse question: how to choose a mentor, because having an unpassionate, unjust mentor might cause more problems. How to understand what fits best. That's a great question. I mean, they're all good questions, but as a role model, you see the way somebody functions. So for example, Bill Heald. When I first worked with Bill, he wasn't famous for mesorectum. He was just sorting it out with Lockhart Mummery. But I saw the way he was committed to do the best surgery he could for his patients and how he loved teaching. To me, that was a great role model. Same for David, same for Stan Goldberg. Finding people who just love what they do and had a way to help share that knowledge. So, that's the kind of mentor I want. I picked Bill, as I said, I never worked directly with him for a long period of time, lots of times sporadically over decades. Because I saw the kind of teacher he was. So I think, for everybody in this meeting and elsewhere, you can see what people are like. You can listen to their lectures, you can hear their conversations, you can read what they write, and you can speak with people who know them and say, okay, this is the kind of mentor I want. And then that's who you should seek out, really. And of course, we all have limits. I would certainly never want to accept somebody as a mentee if I didn't have the time to devote to them. So, try and identify a couple in case not everybody is available. But it's modeling. How does somebody act? That's what I want as my mentor. It may not be somebody at your university, at your hospital, at your city, even in your country, but with remote communication, it all becomes possible. The social responsibility of medical leadership. What is the social responsibility of medical leadership? I mean, there's a lot of things there for social responsibility. One is, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have to make sure that anybody who wants to become a surgeon, anybody who wants to become a leader in surgery can have that opportunity. And for those of you who've seen the programs I've done on the Advances in Surgery channel this year, a lot of top flight programs attracting 35,000 and more participants on diversity, equity, inclusion. And stay tuned for 2022 when there'll be another 12 programs looking at diversity, equity, inclusion. That's one responsibility. The other, well, there are many, but the second one relates to patients, and that's healthcare access. And somehow being sure that everybody can have access to the best care. It's hard when you look around the world, but we need to move in that direction. Within the US, that's why we established the National Accreditation Program for Rectal Cancer, to try and ensure that patients throughout the country have access to the best evidence-based standards practice for rectal cancer. That's why the program started. So I think those are two major responsibilities. And one thing that I've always prided myself in doing is being able to allow people to avail themselves the opportunity of education. And for example, when I was doing my annual course, and the last time I did it was in February 2020 in Israel, the plan was that the annual course was going to be alternate years in Florida and elsewhere in the world. So the first elsewhere we did was in Jerusalem. The plan was, that was February 2020, literally just the world shut down behind us and it stops. There was no course in 2021. 2022, we had initially thought would have been in perhaps many opportunities, Cairo, Istanbul, Hong Kong, Taipei. We hadn't yet picked, but anyway, the point is I raised quite a lot of money from friends to bring surgeons from developing countries to participate in that education, whether it was in Fort Lauderdale and they'd spend time with us after our course, or obligation if we're coming from developed countries to help people from developing countries to avail themselves of education so they could bring it back for their patients. Struggle between personal and professional life. That, again, that's kind of what I alluded to with, hang on, yes, that's what I alluded to with not everybody has the same goals. For me, I always tried to combine as best I could. So my two boys, when they were younger, went to the UK every summer because that was the Association of Coloproctology Great Britain Ireland. So I combined that with the vacations. I go to the meeting and then we go on holiday, or we go, as they got older, elsewhere in the world. And I would combine. I'd do my meeting and then have a holiday. So I would always try and combine things as best I could. It's very interesting. What's telling my younger son, who now is a mathematical whiz writing algorithms for Facebook. But anyway, when I would call him, say, I'm going to be late, where's his dad? He said, we can always have dinner. He said, the patient clearly needs you more than we do at this moment in time, and they develop an understanding because they respect what you, in my opinion, kids respect what you do. Doesn't mean you ignore them, of course not, but they understand, you prioritize them. But then there are, our profession has calls that they will come to respect as kids. That's a whole lecture into itself, is work-life balance. For me, it worked well, but what worked for me may not work for everybody else. So that's for me, was trying to integrate the practice and the kids as best I could. Adverse surgical outcomes. How do you cope with stress? That's another great question. And my late partner David Jagelman may not have been necessarily the most empathetic in that regard, but I remember the first time I had a major complication within my first couple of months of practice, and he said, well, it may be the first time that's happened to you, but it won't be the last. That's not the great advice. I love David. He gave me great advice, but that one wasn't terribly empathetic. I think you need to reflect and you need to learn from it. So what you need, your responsibility is to that patient, of course, to get them through the episode, whatever happened, as best you possibly can. But then it's to your current and future patients, and you owe it to them to not be dragged down like a boat anchor by what happened, or you're not going to be able to give them your best. You need to be sure you're going to focus on them and give them your best. And you can't be paralyzed by remorse or fear or grief. You know, the day you stop caring that a patient has a complication is the day you probably should retire or change professions. So you always have to care. You always have to do your best. But part of doing your best is moving on to the next patient with that lesson learned. And, you know, it may help to talk about it. And there are programs, Hayatham Kefarini at Harvard has a program where, you know, when a surgeon has a complication, a great program. We featured Hayatham's work at the American College of Surgeons during one of our meetings last year. And there's a program where surgeons mentor and empathize with other surgeons who've had complications. And I think that's great. If you don't have a formal program, talking to somebody you trust about it, you know, just sometimes talking out loud will help in that sense. You know, you have to be careful with whom you talk because of HIPAA compliance and the like, but confidentiality. But of course, you know, give surgeons that giving surgeons the opportunity to vocalize in and of itself can be therapeutic. Another question here about surgical education is more difficult than other subjects. Surgical education is difficult, but it's all relative. You know, we think it's difficult because we're surgeons, but there may be other areas that are also difficult, or they think that it's difficult. And I think that's why surgical education takes a long time, because you're learning, and it's watching, and it's practicing, and it's being mentored. So my opinion, as the question asked for, is that you're always being educated. I'm learning things. I'm learning things every day. And again, like I said earlier, when you stop having any feeling that somebody has a complication and you just shrug your shoulders, it's the time to retire. Ditto with education. When you think you know everything, also probably time to retire or change jobs. There's always something to learn. You know, laparoscopy didn't exist when I was in training. David Jacob and I, we taught ourselves laparoscopy. You know, certain things that you know, you innovate along the practice. And I can think of many things that I would do differently now. I didn't learn in practice. I picked them up. I changed them along the way. So you're always being educated. What can the rest of the world learn from the US in terms of surgical infrastructure and vice versa? Well, you know, the US, there's probably no perfect system. But one thing the US has very well is the way training is structured, where we have the residency review committees from the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, ensuring that residents in every program are getting taught to the minimum standards. Then having, you know, the American Board of Surgery certify, and the same thing for colorectal surgery and for all of medicine. So, you know, generically speaking, the best part of the infrastructure is the organization and the consistency. So, you know, if you're going to a hospital in Kentucky versus Kansas versus New York versus New Mexico, you know that that basic substrate is the same. You know, quality of the individuals is always going to vary. Okay, let's see.
I want to ask you personally, how did social media impacted with your leadership? I mean, that you were a big leader before social media appeared and before social media exists. But how do you deal with that, and how do you become, now you're a big superstar and you're famous all over the world? So how do you become that big superstar, and how do you deal with that?
Well, so here's an interesting one. Social media was kind of starting, and Fabio Potenti, who I mentioned, one of my former residents, who was subsequently our chief medical officer before he retired. You know, Fabio one day came to me around 10 years. Wexner, you really need to get involved. He was very polite, even though he should have called me by first names. Italian upbringing in the area around Florence. You really should get involved. I said, okay. I mean, really it was, and that's it. It's listening to somebody who, at least on the leadership ladder, is lower, one of my mentees, but it's having an open mind. And I didn't just shut down and say no. I said, of course, that's a great idea. Let's get involved. And so I started getting involved, and I had a lot of fun with it. And to me, that's one of my hobbies. I love social media. It's a tremendous hobby, but it was listening to one of my mentees tell me this is what you should do. So, okay, I'll do it. Same, with laparoscopy years ago. Everybody else who trained in the initial swath abandoned it pretty quickly, but I mean, Jacob and I persevered. Why colorectal surgery? Somebody says, sir, which things encourage you to focus on colorectal surgery? Why not your passion on hepatobiliary surgery? That's a great question. So when I was a resident, and you can have your passion whatever you like. I mean, everybody's different. It's like ice cream. That's why there's so many flavors. Different people like different things. For me, and remember, there was no laparoscopy at the time and no robotics. Colonoscopy was in its infancy. But what I liked at that time was that I was able to take care of young people, older people. I was able to do little operations like fistulas and hemorrhoids, and big operations like pelvic excentrations. I was able to do things through an abdominal incision, transanally, or colodoscopically. And to me, that was very attractive to have endoscopic surgery. Now it's even multifold more. But so for me, it was the spectrum of age of patients, the types of surgery I could perform, all of these things impacted. But the other part was the people, that I found the people incredibly warm and welcoming and nice. Like I've said a few times, this guy, Rick Brabe, and Tom Daly, Stan Goldberg, Bill, well, by the time Bill healed, I was already differentiated. But even as a surgery resident, those two people, Daly and Brabe, brought me to the New York Society of Colorectal Surgeons, and everybody was nice and warm and welcoming. And I'd been exposed to other surgical specialties as a medical student at Cornell and a resident at Roosevelt. And I didn't find the other surgeons as welcoming and as encouraging to young folks. And I thought, these are a nice bunch of people. I like them. So in part it's the subject, but in a big part it's the people too. Do I have a special method for time management? No, I don't. But what I do have are a lot of people on whom I can rely. I've built a team over my 34 years at Cleveland Clinic, Florida, on whom I can rely. And everybody has their function, and everybody knows what their function is. And yes, I do all of my social media posts myself. Nobody manages my accounts. And yes, I write or co-author every single paper and chapter book. But a lot of the facets that make those things happen for surgical practice and for academic practice, I have people who help me. So my time management is perhaps not doing every facet of everything myself, and having people who can help me do it with a lot of the administrative things. It's having people on whom I can rely. What else? Focus, colorectal? No, I don't know. Did I miss any questions there? I think I got them all.
If there is no other question, we really want to thank you, Professor Wexner. It was a tremendous talk, a lecture. We are really honored to have you as the first speaker. It was a nice talk. Thank you very much, Professor Stephen Wexner. Professor Mahawar, I don't know if you have another comment, question, or something else.
Not really, Mehmet. Well, thank you, Professor Wexner, on behalf of TUGS for your time and for sharing your personal journey with us. It was inspirational for me, and I'm sure it would have been for many of our members. Thank you once again, and it's been an honor and privilege to listen to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and I wish everyone a wonderful day, and look forward to all of us meeting in person, hopefully, in 2022.
Likewise, thank you, and amen.
Okay, cheers. Bye. Happy holidays. Happy and healthy holidays and New Year.
Bye-bye, everybody. Same to you, Professor Wexner. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.